This photograph was taken by one of my students on one of my online courses, and it's going to be the inspiration for this next painting. I like it for lots of reasons. I like it because of the composition. I like it because there are a lot of interesting effects I can do. I can use on this. For example, on the pears, I can do some interesting colour mixing effects there. Also on this metal, looks like metal watering can, and this wood here. And we've got the blue flowers. I like the way the colours work together. So that is going to be the painting subject. I will post this photograph. Looking at it now, the way it's printed off, it's a little bit pixelated, but we won't worry about that. It's also a very good exercise for doing some serious measuring and looking at how things are spaced. Here, for example, is this end here, and it's a good exercise in using points of reference to make sure you get everything in the right place. So we've got, for example, you can check the height of the pear, and if you, I'm excuse me, I'm going to trace that off to make life easier, but it's a good example for you to look at when you are looking at a still life in life, perhaps in reality. You can use measuring points, so you can say the height of that stalk is equal to that, okay? So you can say that that makes, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the total height of that pear is equivalent to 5 stalks. Okay, so it's a representative, it's like a map being 1 centimetre equals 10 kilometres or 10 miles. 1 inch represents 10 miles on a paper road map. So this is a good way of explaining a few things while we're preparing to do this painting. Another good way of looking at things we've got here is to look at the shape that the objects leave. Okay, so you've got where this pear comes down here. Let me just pull that across there so you can see the two. Where the 3 pears join, you have this sort of 3 sections. Okay, so bear in mind you are looking at the gaps as well as the objects. Okay, we're looking at the shape of the shadow in there. It's another triangle. And look at the shape there, and likewise over here as well. Look at the shapes that are left. Look at that little triangle there. Okay, so this is going to be a good measure, a good exercise in really looking at things, and take with you when you're going out into real life. Maybe you're measuring a building and you want to check how many windows make the height. That sort of thing. Use it as a good exercise for measuring. So what I'm going to do is I am going to trace that off. And here it is. You probably can't see that, it's a bit light, but I'm going to post this as a resource for you, and you can trace it off as well yourself. Now, there's only one thing with this that is a slight cause for concern. Where I'm working in oils or acrylics, this solid black, which shows up beautifully these well lit objects here, you've got some lovely, the light is sort of coming down that way, isn't it? That's the direction of the light. But this lovely black really shows them up. It's a classic still life background. If you look at a lot of the still life paintings produced by particularly Dutch masters, you'll notice they have very strong backgrounds because it really shows up the objects. Now, this in watercolour is not really going to be viable, so I'm going to have to come up with a way of doing a different background. I certainly want it to be very dark, and there's probably going to be a few attempts at it. I think this is going to be a question of doing a few little squares of experimenting, which is always a good idea anyway. I will also be doing some practice pieces on these flowers. I'll do a separate piece on how to create those little hyacinths. How are we going to do the pears? How are we going to get the mottling on the watering can and the wood grain effect, etc. So a lot to think about in this one. It's not straightforward, but there are lots of super techniques. If you've done my special effects course, you're probably looking at this now and saying, oh yes, I can do that effect on that bit and that effect on another bit, and so on and so on. So this is going to be a good exercise in that. There's some lovely colours, interesting browns here, and this, I would call these, the English, we would call them a conference pear. It has quite a dry skin, that brown bit's quite dry. This lovely blue, how are we going to make the little white spots on the end? And look at the highlights, particularly on this watering can, really quite interesting. So a lot to be going on with. So I'm going to start off getting the outline traced out onto my paper. I'm going to use a smooth, this is the satin smooth hot pressed paper which I used on my last painting course. It is a Casson, and it is 300 gram or 140 pounds, grain satin hot pressed, and it is super smooth. Okay, so that's the beginning, and I'll see you in the next lecture.